Joshua, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It's your first time on Geeksvana, of course, and I really appreciate you taking the time out.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor to be on Geeksvana. So first of many.
Indeed, let's hope so. Now, of course, as we were saying pre-show, I have watched many of your videos. I pretty much watch all of your live streams. It's as a camera drone guy, I have managed to learn more about FPV through osmosis. I'm just amazed by it, frankly. It amazes me with the things like the Q&As and that type of thing. The amount of information that I actually take on board is incredible. There will be people who don't know you, which is incredible with the hundreds of thousands of subscribers that you enjoy.
How could they?
Indeed, how dare they? Indeed,
I'm not quite stuck up enough yet to be offended by that.
Excellent.
I'm working on it. I'll get there.
Superb. Could you explain to people what Joshua Bardwell is as a channel?
Yeah, so my channel, I make content about FPV drones, basically racing drones, freestyle drones. I've done a little bit of camera drone content, but that isn't my favorite thing to do. No offense. I'm sure none taken. And it's not what my audience comes to see. There's a little bit of sort of a feedback loop there. But basically just making product reviews, how to, as you said, FPV content is extremely technical, and there is an infinite number of problems that people don't know how to solve that then somebody like me can make videos showing them how to solve. So people say, do you think you'll run out of video ideas? And I'm like, not until they make this hobby a lot more user-friendly. I'll always have confused people to help with my videos.
Because of course, and in actual fact, one of the things I've noticed is that actually one person's experience of doing something can be different to another person. So therefore, the errors that come up can be so unique. But of course, there's always a general grid that you can put over those errors to say this is how you can look to try and solve that, which is it's always fascinating because I have to say I think it's very brave from a technical channel as well to go live and say, right, throw your questions at me. I think that's I think it's part of the fun of watching actually is to see if we get anything that you can't solve.
Well, you have to be aware that I am selective about what questions I take. So
of course.
If I see a question and I'm like, I have no idea, I could just skip that one. So, it's a little, but you have to be willing to say, I don't know. I sometimes see a question and I think, oh, that's a good question. And I read the question on the stream and now I'm committed to it and then realize I don't know the answer. And you just have to be, I think people give you a little bit of latitude on a live stream. I've gotten answers wrong, and sometimes the chat says no, you're wrong, and I have to go, oh crap. So it happens. But
Indeed. We carry out quite a lot of live streams on Geeksvana, and that's actually one of the reasons why I like live shows, is because there is that the audience kind of have a slightly different relationship, don't they, with you, from the point of view that they are a little bit more forgiving, that actually if you get something the wrong way round for a moment or something like that, well, and of course if that was in a recorded edited video, they say, why didn't you check that, etc., which is also true. So yeah,
I've done that too.
Haven't we all? I have a couple of famous ones, which I have proudly kept up. I've put in the description and the title, this is wrong, but I've proudly kept them up there just to show that I don't think I'm perfect, etc. So, which is always an important thing to put out there.
Well, I made the mistake of calling my channel FPV Know-It-All, which really puts me in the hot seat when I get something wrong, because they're like, no, I thought you were the know-it-all.
Yeah, but I would argue to know it all, you need to know that you can't know it all, of course, I think is one of those things, isn't it? Which, but I have to say, I always get that vibe, though. I always get that vibe in your show that I don't think people, your regulars that come and ask questions, I don't think they automatically think he's definitely going to know, but they know that you will get them on the line in the right direction, basically, at the very least, which is great.
My thought process is that if someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer, on some level, I want to respond, well, I'm sorry, I don't know. But I don't want to send them away without helping them. And so I tell myself, my best guess is probably better than whatever they've got right now, which is nothing.
Absolutely.
And so I try to give them one step to get them closer in the direction of the solution, even if I can't solve the problem. That's how I think about it.
Now, this is an interesting question in terms of you as a business person and as a content creator, and obviously it's something that I'm interested in as well. There's for people watching, there's a mixture of content on here for us creators, for the FPV community, and also we've got a bit of remote ID coming up later on. I look at other channels who have products to sell on those channels, who have, you know, affiliate links, and you're very open about that, and you tend to find what I think is the right line between having a community, building a community, and things like your open Q&As and that type of thing, and just being a straight salesperson, if that makes sense. You seem to find a line somewhere in between. Where did that come from? Has that always been there?
No, my stance on that kind of thing has developed over the years. You know, originally I had a day job and I made content for fun, and because I liked helping people and I liked getting attention from people who were thankful that I was helping them, but I didn't do it for money. And then eventually I got monetized and I started making money on my channel, and I still had my day job. And then at some point, and for a long time, I didn't do affiliates because I thought that, you know, it's a dirty word, and I want people to know that I'm independent. But I tried the affiliate links, and the truth is that for a channel like mine, like some people say I tried affiliate links, nobody clicked them, nobody used them, I didn't make any money. But for a channel like mine, where people really trust your recommendations and people really feel an affinity towards you and want to support you, the amount of money that they make is difficult to ignore.
Yes, absolutely.
So when I started using them, I looked at the amount of money I was making and I thought, well, maybe there's a way to still do this ethically. And that was part of the reason why I was able to go full time. Not the only reason, but definitely that chunk of money in it, because YouTube by itself doesn't pay, you know, it pays less than you wish it would.
Indeed.
So you got to find ways to supplement that. And I've tried to always do it in a way that doesn't make people wonder about my motivations. You know, I want people to know that when I'm telling them things, that they're things that I actually believe. And so I kind of like, it's kind of like, you know, if you have like a tip jar on the bar or something, right? It's there. We both know it's there. We're not going to talk about it, and except for the one time during the video that I do a call to action.
Indeed.
Because if you don't do the CTA, then they just don't know. But then, you know, and the other thing I do is I don't have affiliates with any one store or any one product. So literally, I have no financial incentive to steer you the wrong way. The only financial incentive I have is to convince you to buy, because obviously, but I feel like, you know, you just try to have integrity and speak the truth, and not, if you tell people to buy something and it's crap and they think you told them to buy it just because you got an affiliate, then you lose your
indeed,
you're killing.
And I've seen you talk down and talk up different brands at different times as well, where you've seen actually a brand that you've supported in the past do something which is a bit douchey, and you said, actually, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the right way to do it. So I don't think anybody would ever call you a yes man. And then you also have the incidentals, like the recent tool, the DeWalt tool that you had the video on, which was something which was gifted to you, and you were like, actually, I use this all the time, so I'm going to do a video on it. So I, as I say, I think you've got that line correct. And again, I think the openness is a good thing, because everybody knows where they stand. Dare I ask you how many hours a week you spend on your channel? So this includes answering questions via email, because I know you do that. I know you will sit down and just answer tons of questions. Obviously, all of your live shows, creating content, running the business, because of course there's a business behind this as well. How many hours a week? Scare us.
I mean, it would be hard to put a number on it, because as you know, as a creator, it's like you're constantly, I mean, maybe you're not, maybe you have boundaries, but like you're constantly like, oh, let me see, do I have any emails? Oh, interesting. Like, so how do you put a clock on that?
Yes.
So in a sense, it's basically 24/7. There are times I'm getting a little bit better at just saying, okay, I'm not doing that right now. But at least 40 hours, right? Easily. In terms of recording content, uploading content, answering questions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously, even though I have a set, but my studio is separate from my house, just because my house just doesn't have the size for it, basically. So that helps me separate things a little bit.
Sure.
But of course, we all have our home office, and I know exactly what you mean. It's an email will ping, and you think, I'm waiting to hear back on something, and I wonder if that's it. And then actually, it's a question from a viewer. And you think, okay, I'll answer that later. But then you see the little the preview, and you think, actually, that looks quite urgent. And then you do. So no, I completely agree with you from the point of view that it's hard to quantify. But I know the amount of hours that I put in on my size channel and my size business from that channel, and I can only imagine how that would scale to your levels, basically.
It has a lot to do with your production schedule. If I only put out one video a week, I probably could spend a lot less time. So it's the number of videos a week that you put out is directly proportional to the amount of work you put in, I think.
Indeed, absolutely, which is also why I love live shows as well.
Oh yeah, no editing.
Indeed.
No editing, right?
One of the and this hopefully shows a slight deepness to the fact that I am a genuine JB channel viewer, as it were. Previously, particularly in your community tab, I'd say probably coming on for a couple of years ago now, you were talking about feeling like the channel was peaking out in terms of the numbers it was hitting and that type of thing. And I think it was about the time when you started to look at some of the consultancy side of things of how to grow your channel and that type of thing. And I've noticed since then that there was a real wave of growth in your channel since then as well. But do you have a desire to go outside of the FPV or even outside of the quad drone niche completely?
That's tough. I mean, I would like to say yes. I'm interested in branching out. And every time I see some interesting, like a new project that Sean Morrison built, like some weird VTOL airplane, or I look at something like Daniel Riley from RC Test Flight has made some weird boat or something, and I think that sounds fun. And one of the privileges of my job is that if I decided I wanted to do that, then I could make a video about it and people would probably watch it. Some people would watch it. So I could decide to do that. And yet when I actually, sit down to make content, that's just never, it feels in a way like I need to make the content that I'm good at making and get that stuff out.
That's it though, isn't it?
There's always, it feels like indulgent.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to do that for me.
Yeah.
And then I never do it. So
no, yeah, and knowing about the topic is such a big thing as well. Obviously, Geeksvana here in the UK, we've become our niche has become a little bit drone regulation, and it is something that I know a lot about. And actually, I therefore take it very seriously that I can sit down and talk about that topic. And I've had the same thing with other niches that you sit down and you think, okay, I'd love to make a video about that, but do I know enough? And then when you start going down the rabbit hole of knowing enough about that, you think, how do I get all of that into a 10-minute video? Well,
And you could say, okay, guys, this is a video, or I'm going outside. I'm not an expert here. I'm going to build an RC boat or an RC car or RC plane, and we're just going to do it for fun. And this is not the know-it-all expert. And you could make that video, but like, it's going to be, you're just going to take you all week to make that one video because you just don't know what the hell you're doing. Right?
Absolutely.
Whereas you could have made 4 or 5 other videos in your area of expertise, all of which are going to do great, all of which are going to help people. They're going to be questions people asking or products they're interested in. And then you're like, okay, is that what I want to do with my week? And it just, for me at least, it just never is, even though maybe I'd be a more well-rounded person. That's the thing, because when you get outside of then a lot of times you're like, oh, this is so cool. And now you open up new doors that you never knew existed.
Yeah, indeed. And I have to say, I respect tech tubers like Marquez Brownlee, who really does cross the niches, and to the point where he's now even got the separate channel for the automotive stuff, and obviously he is one of the absolute principles of tech tubing. But I think that it's very interesting in terms of niching down, because of course the algorithm pushes us that way as well. Of course, doesn't it? The algorithm says good boy, you've done another regulation video, I'm going to push that out to people, and hang on a minute, you're talking about what now? So it's hard as a creator from that point of view as well. Okay, so that's the YouTube bit. The one of the biggest reasons I wanted to talk to you today was actually because my day job, I'm a writer, and I work within the TV and film industry, and of course I'm also a YouTube creator. So when I see another YouTube creator stepping into the world of helping to produce a documentary and a mainstream aimed documentary, it's obviously something which gets my attention and of course my respect as well. It's something which I think has become Flowstate, the FPV documentary. There's links in the chat you can actually stream it right now as well. It's an edited version. You can also how do people get hold of the long form version if they want to see the?
Yeah, so Flowstate, the FPV drone documentary is the full title, and it is a documentary about FPV with the goal, as you said, of we wanted it to be just for people in the FPV world to see what they love up on the big screen, and for people outside the FPV world to see what we love. Like I like to say, I watched this documentary about sushi. I don't know jack about sushi, and it was fascinating, the whole thing. And I was like, can we do that for FPV? So it's available now. You can go to flowstatedocumentary.com. You can actually buy the Blu-ray version, which if you have a Blu-ray player, it has all of the footage we shot.
Nice.
The documentary was originally going to be 3 40-minute sort of mini episodes. That was our goal. But it didn't get sort of picked up on a streaming platform that would let us do that. So we edited. I say we. James Christensen is the guy who did all the shooting and editing. He really deserves the credit. He edited it down to like a 90-minute, 110-minute edit for streaming platforms. So the Blu-ray has all the content. If you go to a streaming platform like Amazon Prime, we have it on our own personal Vimeo site. It's on Tubi, Plex, Hoopla, and a bunch of others. You can watch the sort of theatrical edit as well.
Excellent. Okay, and I think I have a lot of admiration for the project because, I know from working in the industry that there are so many doors that close to you, and you can have an established documentary company, or even have a hit like Stranger Things, and the next thing that you make, you will still have 1,000 doors closed in your face. So
it's very difficult
for a niche of something which is already a niche. So you've got drones, quads, and then FPV, of course, is a sub niche of that. To have that actually up on the big screen and actually on streaming platforms, I think is an absolutely fantastic achievement. Because of course it is there for it's out there now that piece of work exists, and people in 10 years time will still be watching that and will still be thinking, oh, I'm quite interested in that. So. And that whole sort of line will take them into the hobby. Do you feel like the final show delivered on the messages that you were hoping it would?
Well, yes and no. I'll say. I think that the message of the film is what we wanted it to be. Obviously, we edited it. James edited it, and I talked to him about what we wanted to get out of the edit. And the place in which perhaps it didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish was, so we shot the film in 2020 to early 2021, shot a bunch of interviews, and we included a lot of content about remote ID with the idea that they would get the film released. Maybe it was a long shot, that people in the mainstream would see it, would go, this is cool, and get motivated. Unfortunately, we had these doors being closed, as you said. We had a lot of problem getting it distributed, and we, of course, could have just published it on YouTube anytime we wanted and gotten it out there. But the thinking was that we really wanted to shoot for the moon and have it be like on a Netflix.
Absolutely.
Where someone in just your mom could be scrolling through Netflix and be like, oh, what's this? And see it. And so we thought if we only put it out like on YouTube or self-distribute, only FPV people will see it. And that's not what we want. Unfortunately, it took us at least a year, maybe as much as 18 months to get it distributed, from the time when it was finally done editing to the first time it was available on a streaming platform. And in that time, a lot of things happened with remote ID, so that in some ways the content in the video is not as fresh I mean, the FPV content is amazing, but the 2 chapters are about, hey, remote ID is coming and we should fight it. Well, oops, it's already here. And so I feel like I wish that it had been released sooner when it could have had more impact.
It's such a tough thing, isn't it? And again, I completely respect the fact that you wanted to bring it to the actual platforms, the actual outlets, because I agree that the moment you put anything like that anywhere near YouTube or anything else like that,
They won't touch it.
Yeah, it's gone. It is just, hey, all they see is I'd like to make this YouTube video a documentary now, please.
Yeah, the other mistake, and this is me just being a rookie in marketing and film, the other mistake was that I feel like we underestimated how long it would take to get it out, get it distributed. We started marketing and building excitement for it, and then we sort of shot our wad too early. And by the time it was actually available, it was a year later, and people were like, "That thing, didn't that already come out?" And if I were more experienced with marketing, then I would have known not to do that. But we were so excited, we wanted people to know it existed.
Yeah. But again, if you go to any marketing company that knows what they're doing in that realm as well, they don't know either, actually. So most marketing companies in the whole sort of getting you onto these things, they'll say, yeah, we could probably get you meetings within about a month or two and this type of thing, because often that is how it will happen, but you just don't know. And there's a lot of people in the middle ground there, but then there's lots of people that have to wait a lot longer, and actually some that get snapped up so quickly it becomes a bit of a whirlwind, because perhaps there's 3 other things happening in that niche on Netflix that month or something, so they say, yeah, okay, we'll have that as well because people will watch it next, etc. So are you brave enough to attempt a sequel?
I would consider doing it again. I would need to have a better plan for how to not lose. Well, I shouldn't say lose. How to not spend a ton of money. I said going into the film that if all it did was make this, I call it a love letter to FPV, and I made no money off of it, I would still, be like, okay, I'm just going to commit this money up front. I love the fact that this film is out there, that people can see it, that I can know that I helped make it.
Awesome.
But I probably wouldn't do that 2 times.
Okay. I
would have to actually believe I was going to make a profit on it.
Okay, so next up, I wanted to talk to you a bit about a segment which I've called New Blood, basically. And everywhere I see, I'm starting to see younger and younger pilots, particularly actually in FPV. I'm personally starting to see a lot of young people in the meetups and the races and that type of thing. Is that something that you're experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, kids are always the ones who are picking up the sort of new thing, especially with the technical challenges. They're more sort of adaptable and receptive to new information. They just are smarter in some ways than us old guys who've been doing it forever. Yeah, we're 100%.
And so skillful as well, aren't they? When you see just how incredibly skillful some of these young pilots are, it absolutely blows my mind. And I don't think it's just the pilots that we all used to follow are just getting a little bit older now. These guys are really pushing the boundaries. It's incredible.
It's not what I think of is that in any new hobby, like you think about skateboarding, I think there's so many parallels between FPV and skateboarding. Like originally skateboarding was just basically surfing on land, and nobody had thought of doing like tricks like some of the skaters invented. And then you have guys come along and they invent these tricks, ollies and kickflips and I don't know. And these guys invented these things, and the very first people who like invented FPV, number one, they were limited by their technology. Like quadcopters just flew worse, and so people were less able to do things. But number two, they came in and they had these ideas about what quadcopters or multirotors could do. And these kids come in and like the thing about the Matty flip. The first time Matty did a Matty flip, no one had done that before.
Incredible.
And now, like some kid with 20 hours of flight time under his belt's doing Matty flips because that's just sort of a thing you do. So those early pilots weren't doing those things, and it's not just because of their age or whatever. It's that the longer the hobby goes on, the more the domain of what you do expands. And it's great.
No, exactly, indeed. Okay. This is a very 2019 question, I feel, but it's one that I'm bringing back. Do you think that drone racing will ever become mainstream? And we see a lot of push from DRL and others, and I'm a fan of DRL, but actually I think some of the other World Series actually kind of do some of it better. But do you think it's something that could become mainstream in the next few years?
I think it's difficult because as a spectator sport, it's challenging as a spectator sport. I think a lot of people have trouble keeping up with the tracks.
Mm.
You know, like a racetrack, you can have the little map on screen and you can see where the cars are. People sort of understand automobile racing because they drive automobiles, and so in a sense, it's like, you know, people understand football because they've thrown a ball before and they
Absolutely.
run. But you show somebody drone racing and they have no context. Even something like airplane racing or acrobatics, people kind of grasp airplanes. Multi-rotors are so outside of people's experience that it's very hard for them to grasp what's going on in a drone race. So, you know, you look at companies like Airspeeder that are trying to do like live drone racing, and that's something that might make it go mainstream, but I think that is pretty far from being technically and
I don't know why, but I still see that as almost like the sort of Red Bull racing in terms of, you know, the full manned racing that they have. I always see Airspeeder perhaps going in that direction because, as you say, it's so far off being exactly what they want it to be, as it were.
I don't know what their game plan is. I know that a lot of times, like startup companies will have a story that they tell about their company that in reality is kind of like a pie in the sky. And they're going to aim for here, and they're going to kind of land here, and maybe they'll make some money. I have to feel like the story that Airspeeder tells about what they want to do is completely unachievable in any realistic time frame.
The VC story.
I don't know what it is that they're actually trying to do. Like, you look at that video. There was a video recently of like their first race, and there's barely any racing in it.
Yeah, and when they are moving, they're moving very slowly, and it's
right.
Yeah, you know, it's almost an update of how difficult they're finding it, isn't it? Rather than necessarily being a look how much progress we've made type of update. But hey, you know, who knows?
Who knows? More power to them.
Although of course you say who knows, but you look how slowly sport moves from being fringe to mainstream. How long some very good sports took to become Olympic sports. Even, you know, it's a very hard thing to crack into.
But it doesn't have to move slowly. Like how long after automobiles existed did it take for there to be automobile racing? I don't know the answer to that question. There was a period where automobiles were kind of slow and uninteresting. And as soon as you got a car that could go fast, I guarantee you someone was racing it.
Yeah.
The problem with drone racing is that we don't have manned multi-rotor aircraft that are safe to race or to even really fly in. They're extremely limited. And aerial racing by itself is extremely dangerous. Like,
absolutely.
You look at airplane racing, and there's a lot that goes into making that safe. So the idea that we're going to have like drone racing as we know it with pilots on board is inconceivable, because drone racing as we know it involves a lot of crashing.
Indeed, exactly. Which I suppose is why I hope it does, that sort of thing does become mainstream as well, because I really enjoy going down the rabbit holes of watching the vlogs of the races that are involved in these various different World Series and things. And there's so much passion, there's so much commitment, and there's so much time and effort that goes into these things. Now the not so elephant in the room, because everyone's talking about it at the moment, of remote ID. And I promise those of you that are sick of remote ID, this will only be a brief conversation towards the end of this, but you have just put out a remote ID video yourself, which I have to say I agreed with an awful lot with. One of the things I like about watching your videos is I can always pull out one or two things that I disagree with, but I think you do that on purpose, because I think you like to cover the bases, and I think you like to give the actual information, so it's not just do I agree with your opinion, it's actually these are the facts, basically, which I think your RID video is very very fact-based. And one of the things I really liked, because it's actually, we have an interview booked with the FAA next week, and one of the things that we're focusing on with remote ID is enforcement, because I think that's where the conversation is. It's obviously a very individual thing whether somebody wants to comply or not, and I agree with you that most hobby RC flyers, especially in the self-build niche, if they don't comply, then probably not, it would be a very unusual thing for them to have any kind of issue.
100%.
But in terms of the approach that the FAA might take, do you think we might see something like the sort of the spectacles being made of people type thing, examples being made and a few sort of large cases, or will this be another trust thing? Because when trust came in, and obviously everybody now has to have a trust certificate, they openly said, we're not going to be enforcing this because it's very new. We know everybody, we need to get the message out there enough. And although it's more enforced now, it still isn't a hard brick wall of enforcement. And I wonder if they might go that direction, because of course this is very new to them as well.
Well, the problem is whether it's an administrative or political decision, or whether it's that they just don't have enough resources to do widespread enforcement, the reality is the same. Most people won't have an enforcement action against them, but some people will. And for the people who have enforcement brought against them, that's going to be a big problem for them. So, I mean, we can look at what they've done in the past, that for the most part, they haven't sort of dinged people, like, for example, flying without a 107. They haven't gone after people, but there have been some high profile examples where they have gotten somebody and said, generally they'll say, hey, can you make a video talking about, hey, ooh, this was wrong, I didn't know. They generally want to help with sort of propagandizing and educating, as it were. But the real problem is going to be for professionals, in my opinion. Hobbyists don't care, but professionals they're not going to be able to get some jobs, because if they're not complying with the rules, then they won't get hired. They need to be able to say, I'm complying with all the rules for legal and insurance purposes. And there are some things which remote ID simply makes impossible. Like, I haven't whined about this very much because it really only affects me and mostly doesn't affect my viewers. But like under remote ID, 107 operations will only be able to be done with standard remote ID modules, not modules, which means that commercial operators cannot build their own drones.
Yes.
Cinelifters, no, can't use them unless the manufacturer of the Cinelifter goes through the hoops of making it standard remote ID, which many of them won't. Can't build your own. What it means, even more than that, I cannot do a review of the new iFlight Bind and Fly, because my review is inherently commercial, because this is my job, and that is not a standard remote ID aircraft, because iFlight isn't going to do that, which means that there's no way you're going to be fine because you just do DJI stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it all has remote ID. Well, you're not even in the US, but
yes,
but people who do hobby stuff are just screwed.
Yeah, no, indeed, absolutely. And this is actually one of the things which I've mentioned a couple of times recently, but again, it is a slightly more niche-y type of issue, as you say. But a FPV in the 107 world, it has become a real force recently, and it's going to be interesting to see how it's handled, because there's tons of movie sets right now that have some all these incredible racers and freestylers are now pro pilots. That's often a lot of these dead YouTube channels of previous racers and pro pilots is because they're too busy on set.
They're
basically
all working.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They're doing amazing work, and I see it on set myself. And an FPV pilot comes on, and I thought to myself, just a month ago, I thought, when September comes, how are people going to be able to deal with this? Because they will have to effectively get that aircraft certified, and that's impossible, of course.
It's impossible, exactly. So it is impossible that a FPV hobby drone, and by the way, for those who fly fixed wings, again, is Horizon Hobby going to make all of their aircraft be standard remote ID? That it's actually plausible that a company the size of Horizon Hobby might be able to pull that off. But a company like an iFlight making bind and fly drones, a company like Catalyst Machine Works who builds bespoke Cinelifters, there's no way that they're going to have standard remote ID. I don't see it. And what that means is that anybody who wants to do any kind of commercial work at all with those aircraft is going to be in violation. And it's very difficult. Like a lot of people who make content skate under plausible deniability. The FAA can't prove. But if I'm reviewing a drone and I say this is the new iFlight Chimera 27 and
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah.
have remote ID on it, how can I review that?
No, indeed.
How can I
indeed.
make any content
Have
of
to
that?
build yourself a very large hangar so you can do all of the reviews indoors or something. It's
Yeah.
I know that this is actually a specific question that Dave Messina and of course Blunty at FPV Freedom Coalition, that they are right now trying to deal with and trying to get answers from the FAA with, because of course there is a growing 107 use of FPV drones, and I think it would be a shame because, as you say, again, a movie set with all the insurances and a TV set with all the insurances and everything, they dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and if a regulation somewhere says you cannot fly that without, because there is no remote ID and he's a 107, they won't allow it, and I would hate to see that burgeoning industry get snuffed out because of this.
And realistically, if I were a betting man, I would bet that that's not going to happen. I would bet that the professional will say, yes, sir, I've ticked all the boxes. And the movie set will take their signature on the line and they will continue doing what they're doing. But it's not fair to put people in the position of exposing themselves to liability like that just so that they can continue to make jobs. And I don't want to sort of overstate the importance of people like me to the FPV hobby and sound like self-aggrandizing. But if people like me or Oscar Leong or Albert Kim, or I'm just naming the guys I used to watch, I'm offending a whole bunch of people because I didn't name them. Apologies. If people like us can't make content about FPV drones, that's really bad for all the hobbyists.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, and of course the other people in the wider community that are getting affected by that are people that use FPV drones to put food on the table, and that's always where I say the hobby's vital. The hobby's so important, but so is the people that then develop that hobby into something which is actually starting to feed the family and things. And it's hopefully we'll get a memo or something from Dave and Blunty and everybody's work with the FAA to make it a workable thing. But as you say, in the meantime, it will probably mean some people flying kind of non-compliant, because they'll probably, being professionals, they'll probably stick modules on there anyway, so they will be broadcasting.
I disagree respectfully. My opinion is that as long as the whole thing is stupid, from a practical reason. Like you put me on a boat and the rule is that when you're on the boat, you're supposed to wear the life jacket at all times. And I may or may not wear the life jacket, but I believe that wearing the life jacket, I see why you want me to wear a life jacket. I get that.
Yeah.
But you asked me to put a remote ID module on my aircraft, and I'm like, there is no justification for this in any way. It doesn't do anything. So my opinion is that as long as you're non-compliant, just why people are like, oh, maybe I'll put a module on, but I'll disable it. And I'm like, just don't. If you're going to be non-compliant, just be non-compliant. You're not fooling anybody.
And there's also, I mean, over here we often have the CAA on the channel. We have the National Police on this channel. I'm on an advisory board for the National Police in terms of drone enforcement as well. And one of the things I always try and put across from the FPV hobby side of things is that it is very difficult to ask these people to comply with the current regulations, let alone remote ID or anything, when the very first thing they do by flying without a spotter, because that is 99.99999% of FPV flyers worldwide, they're already breaking the rules. So then why are they so motivated to follow the other rules and that type of thing? And I just wish that there was a little bit more engagement and a little bit more understanding of what actually happens in the hobby and the professional side of FPV, that just because you've donned some goggles, it doesn't mean you're suddenly the devil, basically, so I completely agree with you, and that's part of it as well, is that FPV pilots who comply with remote ID and have modules, but then they're flying without a spotter. It's like, well, which you're kind of choosing to comply with one and not the other. So, but I have long conversations with John Coopy, who's one of the FPV guys that I lean on in terms of asking lots of questions. So he gets a lot of messages from me each week, and he feels the same way, that actually, your FPV hobbyist out in the wilds, out in Missouri and that type of thing, that they're just enjoying their hobby, will probably just continue as is, and will will feel very little heat over this, basically. And
Yeah,
you'll obviously get a pang when you see somebody being prosecuted, or a story about someone being prosecuted or something, but actually the hobby will continue for them.
my fear is that if the FAA wants to, they can bring their force to bear on people like me.
Yes.
If the FAA decided to run my channel out of business, I think they probably could. Because by the strict letter of the law, or the rule, I should say, it's not a law, it's a rule.
Yes.
By the strict letter of the rule, there's no way to do some of the things that are essential to my channel. So the question, if they decided to just try to really run me out of business, they could. And again, I shudder for what that would mean. Not that the hobby can't exist without me, but it's difficult for the hobby to exist in its current form without someone like me.
Yeah, no, indeed.
Making troubleshooting content, educational content.
100%. 100%.
And so I worry about the future of the hobby from that perspective. I hope that they won't do that.
Yes, no, indeed.
But they
indeed.
could.
And the final thing I was saying on remote ID, and I'm going to, as well as link to Joshua's channel in the description below, which, again, if you watch Geeksvana and you're not a subscriber there, I don't know why, but I suppose some of you camera guys may not be. I still recommend it, because actually learning about what goes on inside our drones is actually really important. And because you're teaching people that, of course, it's a dumbed down way of, sometimes when I go to MadTech's live streams, I literally, my head is gone in about 10 minutes, because he's very technical.
He's extremely technical.
It's incredible. The guy is so talented. But I'm also putting a link specifically to your remote ID video, because I think as well, the enforcement side of things, reminding people who can and cannot enforce these things, that you're not going to get, an FAA ticket from a local sheriff type thing. I think that's a really important message as well. So do go subscribe to Joshua's channel, but also watch that remote ID video, because I think it's one of the most balanced out there, frankly. But thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to watching, to lurking in your next live stream.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.